Welcome to the Level Up Artist podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana M.A. and
Jackie Sanders. We're two art professionals sharing for the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
We talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop new episodes every Tuesday.
So on today's episode, we are so excited to welcome Jalen Jackson. Welcome, Jalen.
Thank you for having me. So excited.
Yes, of course. We're so excited to talk with you about your creative journey and, of course, your residency at Artspace, as well as recording a bonus segment on making meaningful artwork for our podcast supporters at levelupartist.com. But real quick before we dive in, we're going to go ahead and share a little bit more about you and your background for our listeners who may not be familiar with your work.
So Jalen Jackson is a visual artist from Durham, North Carolina. He's the first artist to be awarded Artspace new HBCU Artist in Residence. Jackson graduated from North Carolina A&T State University with a BFA in painting in 2021. His work has since been featured in Walter Magazine and in various group exhibitions across North Carolina. Jalen is passionate about inspiring people with his naturalistic figurative paintings. He celebrates his African American subjects as role models to inspire and motivate viewers who face daily adversity in their own lives. And of course, that's the formal introduction we do. But Jalen, how would you describe your work to someone who's never seen it before, especially since some of our listeners may be driving right now while they're listening to this episode?
Well, you pretty much summed it up. I can add that I like to include a sense of nostalgia when someone looks at my work. I like for people to reflect on when maybe times were a little simpler or when you worried less about things. That's why a lot of my paintings they have children in them as subjects. Because when you're a kid, you don't have as much stress sometimes. I know everybody's childhood isn't the same, but for some, you didn't really have to worry as much as you do when you get older. You have a lot of responsibilities when you get older. So I like to kind of add that nostalgia into my paintings as well, for people to, sit and reflect on what I paint about.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Jalen, when did you first become seriously interested in art, especially as a career?
It was when I changed my major from business management to visual arts my junior year of college. I ended up taking a random art class my junior year with James Barnhill, and he convinced me to change my major after just that whole class. And I created my first painting in that class, and it was pretty cool. And I was like, okay, maybe I can, start painting more. And eventually I started taking it serious. Um, when I started to, really develop a certain type of love for it. And I met Alia. I think it was my junior year of college, may have been when I actually took a year off from college. During that time that I took off, I met Alia, and she gave me a space inside her studio, Alia El, and
Mhm.
I was able to study under her for a while. It was like over a year, I think. And
Nice.
just the things that I was able to learn from her wisdom, and just, just her sharing her space with me meant a lot to me. So
Yeah.
I was able to really take my career or my ideas to another level and start
Yeah.
off my career strong.
Yeah. And for our listeners, we did interview Alia as well, Alia Al, so definitely make sure to check it out. Super cool, very, very generous artist and teacher. Now, Jalen, going back a little bit, so did you paint as a kid? Like, did you draw, sketch, were you the arty kid? Tell us a little bit more about that. Did your mom give you your first set of crayons? Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
So when I was a kid, I did draw a lot. Uh, During my solo show, my first talk at Wake Tech, I mentioned how my first drawing was uh, it was interesting because I drew these. It was two people, and it was like one person versus another, and it was because of a situation that when I was outside playing with one of my friends, he asked me a question that really shocked me, and I can't really go into the details about the question, but it was the first time I was able to draw about something that confused me. Um, because, and it's funny now when I think about it later on in life, when I started the series that I'm working on now, it started by someone asking a question um, in an event that I attended, and the person that answered the question, his answer was confusing to me, and I left the auditorium feeling like, what can I do about that? And then the question came up again later on in life, and that's how I was able to start a series of paintings because I felt like it was a stereotype that um, a woman can't raise a man. So I had to try to figure out a way to shine a light, a positive light on the women uh, trying to raise a son or a daughter, but specifically a mother and son because that's what I had went through growing up.
Mhm.
Nice.
I love that. I think that's especially something that we talk about as fellow artists is a lot of the time some of our work can really start by whether we are unpacking a specific question, kind of like making a problem just to be able to solve it, or like you mentioned, having a question that really just startles you or is a way that you looked at the world in a different way, which maybe is very different perspective than you and trying to unpack like how do other people think that way? What does that mean? And then all of those seemingly unanswerable questions, unpacking that through your art. So I absolutely love that. And obviously, figurative work, unpacking those relationships is a direct correlation when you do your amazing figure paintings. So, how did you narrow it down to that style and subject matter of your work? Was it always just very natural for you to paint figures?
No, it wasn't supernatural for me to paint figures. Actually, when I used to try to figure out how to paint portrait or not paint portraits, I try to figure out how to draw portraits, I would get so frustrated because it just wouldn't turn out the way I wanted it to. Um, the reason why I started painting figuratively is because I wanted to challenge myself and figure out a way. Okay, I see how I'm able to draw a face, but how can I make it more interesting? Like I really want to like put a put an actual person on a canvas or a panel and have someone just look at it and be amazed by it. So that was something that was very interesting to me. I want to challenge myself in that way. So when I met Ali and I started taking her classes at Anchor Light, she was able to help me develop skills to paint figuratively because she's also an amazing figurative artist. So learning a lot from her really helped me figure out how to put together a composition, um, how to figure out what I can do with space. It's not, and that was just the technical part about it, but it was also a challenge for me to figure out what to paint about and how I can put a story together. So a lot of times when I create a painting, I don't want someone to just look at it and just sit with it for 5 seconds and then walk away. I want someone to sit with it and contemplate on what it really means that I'm trying to say. So it's really all about turning a picture into words, into an actual story, and also creating a conversation from looking at the paintings. That's my main goal is to really think about what I'm trying to say, so that people can understand where I'm coming from, what I think about from time to time.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So, we've mentioned Ali a few times and as well as Anchor Light. Could you tell us a little bit more about that experience being at Anchor Light and, being along, being there with some artists that we absolutely love as well. Obviously we want to name drop everybody. Clarence is one obviously that we've interviewed on the podcast as well, but I think Precious was there at the same time as you were and a few other folks. So could you share a little bit about that experience and how it has positively impacted your artistic trajectory, being
Yeah.
around other professional artists?
So the Anchor Light community is great. It's a lot of great artists such as you said Clarence and Miss Precious. Um, so when I was at Anchor Light, Miss Precious was the Brightwork Fellow during the time. So I remember just going to her studio, knocking on her door, and just like kind of introducing myself. And that first sit down, the first sit down with her, and the first conversation with her was like, okay, wow, this woman is very intelligent, very wise, and she knows a lot about our history and culture. And she does it, and she shows how much she knows about it through her textile work. Um, I'm pretty sure people, will see the type of work that she does. And when she had that show after the Brightwork Fellowship ended during that year, it was so impactful. And you just if you went to the show, I'm pretty sure you learned something that you didn't know before. And
Mhm.
that's the kind of person she is, kind of artist she is. She'll teach you things that you didn't know before. Um, and that was something that I admired about her and I admired about the Anchor Light community. Is that people there are good people. Clarence, he was someone that, would come over to the studio, give me feedback, give me tips and advice about, the journey and what to look forward to, what to watch out for. So just, that mentorship was really important when I was at Anchor Light, and it really impacted my uh journey as an artist because it made me realize how important networking is. Networking um plays a huge part in your journey throughout any kind of career that you would pursue. It doesn't just have to be an art career. Any kind of career is important that you network because um I've heard a lot of times people tell me it's not about what you know, it's who you know. It's about who knows you as well.
Hmm.
So uh
Oh
meeting
yeah.
people, and the type of people that you meet if you start to uh develop unique uh relationships with people, good relationships with people that bring positivity into your life, into your journey. It can be a life-changing experience.
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And yeah, and if you've ever heard us, well, I know you've heard us because obviously your studio's next door to mine. You hear us talking about this too. It's like we're so big on that idea of community over competition. So I'm glad that you were able to already have that experience. There's nothing like being able to go to another artist and being like, hey, I just got this email. I need a second set of eyes. Like, is this too good to be true? Or like, is this a good opportunity? And there's nothing like being able to, be around other professionals that can kind of give you, that additional set of opinions.
Mhm.
Solicited opinions, I should say, and feedback and just kind of help you out, especially if you're going through a tough moment or you're stuck on a piece, having that extra set of eyes, invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially for yourself and many of us artists who are, as I call like full-time artists with full-time day jobs, being really conscious of how you're spending your time, making the most of your time can be helpful when talking to other artists that maybe are balancing that same um thing. And so for you, how do you find like balancing your full-time day job as a delivery driver and making your artwork? What does that process look like for you?
It is not easy.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, but um, I've come to the conclusion that sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do um until you're able to live the life that you want to live. And I feel like that's what makes the journey so much special. Like when you finally get to a point in life that you're comfortable, I think you have to put in the work in order to get to that point because nothing comes easy. Nothing worth having comes easy. That's a quote that I like to think about from time to time. That's what keeps me going and
Mhm.
stay motivated. But uh, even though I put in long hours during my day job, um, I think about how if I can put in those long hours for someone that I work for, then I have to be able to put in the long hours for myself. to work for myself. So if I think about that, that helps me, that beats the tiredness, after delivering a whole route, I'm exhausted, but the funny thing is sometimes your passion makes you forget about how tired you are. You have to be able to realize that, or you have to be able to see the bigger picture. I know sometimes when I get really deep into a painting, uh, it happens like every time. If I get really deep into a painting, the first thing I think about when I wake up is that painting. And then the only thing I'm thinking about during the day is that painting. Even when I'm at work, I'm thinking about that painting.
Mhm.
So much so that I might deliver a box to a wrong house and then think about it 5 minutes later and like, oh, I gotta go back and get that box. It's not the right box for that house. So it's certain things like that. That passion just makes you do certain things like that. But
Mhm.
when I finally finish with that route and I get to go to the studio, that's like woosah, like I'm able to release a lot of that stress and get back to what I love doing. So
Yeah.
like I
And
said,
I
it's
love
it's
that.
hard.
I love that idea that you mentioned of like if you were to put that time in for a day job, then why wouldn't you commit that time to yourself as well? Because I think a lot of the time, I mean, there's always excuses not to do things, right? And so I love that idea of just almost trusting yourself and investing in yourself and the future of what you know you can build art career wise, body of work wise, just passionate expression, and investing in yourself, I think is a really great takeaway of reframing it that way rather than, oh, after a full time like day job, like I have to go work. Like technically, you don't have to go work in the studio. Like technically, there's no one holding your feet to the fire. So it can be easy to lose that momentum that many artists have felt. But I think it is one of those momentum building things, as you mentioned. It's one of those, yes, it's a long day at work, but then you're just chomping at the bit to get back to the studio because you're like, I think I finally resolved this one part of the composition. I know what I need to do. And so when you finally get to your studio space, it's almost like, yes, it's a second work day is beginning, but it's a totally different energy than maybe a day job where you're working for an employer. So,
Right? Right. I
yeah.
also want to add that, like, even when I'm working during the day, the fact that I'm still thinking about the studio and my painting that I'm working on, most of the time ideas still develop and ideas still come to me.
Mhm.
Like I said, I'm driving most of the day, so a lot of the ideas come when I'm driving. So the fact that I'm
Mhm.
driving as a job, those ideas are still flowing, and that makes it even more exciting because if I just came up with this idea while I'm working, that makes me even want to get off work even more to go back to the studio
Mhm.
to exercise that idea I just got while I was working. So it's
Yeah.
fun, it's difficult, it's hard, it's a challenge, but it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think that is a testament to sometimes some artists may say like, "Oh, well, I just like do this on the side," or nothing wrong to be like a hobbyist artist, but being a artist like yourself who's like really growing this intentionally as a career, very well, by the way. Like
Thank
that creative vision isn't something you can just turn off, right? And I think that's a testament to the investment that you're doing into your work because you can't just say, oh, well, now I'm not going to think about my artwork for like 3 days. Like it doesn't work like that. Even maybe some days we wish we could turn it off, but it's constantly just problem solving, brainstorming ideas. And that's kind of the fun magic of it. Which kind of brings me to also when thinking about your work and how it evolves, how do you find and choose different opportunities with your art career, whether residencies, exhibitions? How do you find those, and what are you looking for when you're looking for opportunities?
So, um, to be honest with you, I just work as hard as possible because I feel like when I uh when I'm putting in the work, the opportunities kind of like come naturally, in a way. So for example, right now I just got back from Greensboro about a couple of days ago for opening at an exhibition at my alma mater, um, NCA&T. But before, everything started happening, my professor just randomly texted me and asked me would I like to be the featured artist in the alumni exhibition that they have coming up. And, I was honored to be even asked to do that. So, and that, like I said, it was just something that happened naturally. Um, Stuff like that that's basically how like exhibitions have been coming up recently. And as far as like the residency that I'm in at Artspace, um, just going back to the point I made about networking, um, networking is important as well because you get to meet people and um, for example like the LOF that just opened up in Durham, my hometown. Meeting her, Linda Shropshire, the one who's running it, meeting her is important. Just in ways that like you're able to see what's out here, what's going on in the art world. Because if you put yourself out there and just try to be a part of any kind of community in the art world, any kind of community that you can, it'll be beneficial to you in the long run. Just introducing yourself to people. So that's how things just be come about right now. That's how it's been coming about. But yeah, that's how it's unfolding.
I love it. And I just want to underline a quick point. It's like you're not just putting, your headphones in, keeping your head down and just doing the work. You're actually spending the time, or I should say, investing the time in relationships. And that's, I think, a key component that a lot of artists forget. It's like it does, and you mentioned this earlier, it does boil down to who you know. At the end of the day, literally it's a relationship business more than anything. The art can be studded with, I don't know, you know, gold and diamonds, and it can be amazing or it can be the most generic thing anybody's ever seen. It doesn't matter. It's who you know and kind of like the story that you're trying to put across with them and how they take that story and share it with others as well. And then they try to help find a place for it. So it's relationships. It's all about that. Now question for you is Artspace your first residency? And with that, how do you feel the interaction with the public with things like First Friday um is different or has impacted your art maybe a little bit different than say if you were only working from home?
Great question. So Artspace is technically my first residency, but like I said, when Alia gave me the space in her studio, that also felt like a residency. So so in a way, it feels like my second one, but it is definitely my first official residency. Um, and being a part of the community during like the first Friday events, that has been a life-changing thing because it makes you think about your work in a special way. You have to, and that's something that you have to think about when it comes to like the community as well. Like when I talk to people who like mentor me, it's good to have great mentors because they try to tell you like you have to be able to make work for yourself and not work for other people. And I want to tie that back into like the first Friday events. When people come by and like you want to try to make a sale, sometimes you're thinking about what people may like. But if you think too much about what people may like, you kind of lose that connection with your own and what you may like. So it's like you have to kind of find the balance between selling work and making work that you want to make. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a tricky thing because you have to if you're a full-time artist, you have to sell work to be able to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when it comes to the first Friday events, you may have someone come by and they buy one of your pieces, and it's a great thing. And I think that I experienced with someone buying one of my pieces, I know one of my favorite pieces, my favorite piece that I had made at the time. was sold during the first Friday event, and I felt like I had lost my baby, you know. So so trying to find that balance between like, selling work and making work for yourself.
Hmm.
It's an interesting thing. First Friday events, like they really kind of brought that to my attention. It's like you have to be able to find a way to find that balance so that you can live and survive. So it's interesting. First Fridays it's been great. It's always a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll take some time. I'm only like sharing forward advice I've heard from my own mentors, but that part about it feels like you're selling your baby, that will go away with time, Jalen. Like I used to
Oh
know the
yeah.
name of every single painting I had painted up until a certain point. Now I can't keep track. There's over 1,000 probably, hundreds, I don't know. Um, but one piece of advice that I always found helpful that you may find helpful at the stage you're in or our listeners was that idea that the process belongs to you and what you learn through that process and what you love through that process, it rolls over from one painting to the next. But when you're done with a painting, that painting doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to that person that's going to find respite in it, connection, sanctuary, like they're going to feel themselves reflected in the painting or the story you're trying to get across. But essentially that idea, like it doesn't belong to you, and that makes it a heck of a lot easier to try to find, like when somebody says, oh, it's me, like that's me, or it reminds me of my grandmother or the time I was a kid that I spent at XYZ, then it doesn't feel like you're quote unquote selling out. You're just like, no, it found the right home. Like, yes, please take it, because also that funds the next one that's coming up, that's already cooking in your brain, that's on its way.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it helps, but I did find it very impactful because I was also very, very attached to my work. It's so personal. It's so personal that it's vulnerable, but also finding that balance of it has to be so personal that it's also relatable to other people. And when people see themselves reflected, then it's
Mhm.
time to let it go. Um,
Yeah.
Terrell, you can't hog all your own paintings, like even
Yeah.
if
That's
even if theoretically you didn't have to sell them to pay bills, I mean, at a certain point it becomes hoarding your own work. Like,
Hmm.
it has to go out there in the world. Has to
yeah,
leave the
yeah.
nest at some point.
Yeah,
Exactly.
another
Exactly.
another good point that I feel like you touched on, Jalen, too, is there's obviously the selling aspect of First Friday, which, as you mentioned, like if you're striving to become a full-time artist without a full-time day job and selling work is the primary income, then we all need to sell work, which is great. But also even just the feedback and impact that visitors of our studio can have on our work. I know, at least for me personally, that took me a while to get used to. And one thing I found is like holding the praise as well as the criticism on an equal level, to where sometimes it can be, of course, it feels great when someone falls in love with your work and they have all these amazing words of affirmation to say about it, or someone may come in and be like, why did you make that decision? Or they say like, this needs to be different, and you're like, we find ourselves getting defensive, like, who are you to tell me what my work needs to be, like.
Mhm.
So it can be hard to like not overly value either one of those things, because to your point, like our work is our work. We get to decide what the process is. We get to decide what the end uh deliverable is, essentially. And so that can be very exposing when having a public facing studio like at Artspace, because that's a unique situation that not many artists get, which we are all, I know, on this call and all the other artists on Artspace very thankful for. But it's a very strange feeling, or any artists that have done markets where someone makes a side comment on their piece as they walk by their table, and then a week later it's like that's still like in your brain, you're just looking at that painting in a different way. But it sounds like you have all the right components, a lot of great mentors that are guiding you through the process, and a good head on your shoulders. So that is very helpful with having that thick skin when it comes to the unknowns of public opinion when they come through our studio. But was curious now, nearing the end of your art space residency, what is one piece of advice that you would give an artist who is seeking to have a residency experience at either a place like Artspace or somewhere else, maybe even not community facing?
Go for it. Please go for it. It's a great opportunity. It's hard to like think about something that could be better than a free studio,
Mm.
and it for not just art space, but anywhere who's given the opportunity to have to give you a residency. Like sometimes it comes with stipends, and you know it's it's great for you as a person, an artist, because you're able to have a space to yourself to explore new ideas. So yeah, just go for it, make the best of it, um, and work when you get it, work. You gotta work.
Make the
Take
most of the time for sure.
take full advantage of it.
Mhm.
Especially the networking, as you said, talk to the
Yeah.
other folks that are there, make those connections. Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much for that, Jalen. Next up, one thing we like to ask all our guests is how they define success. But first, we're going to put in a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by the Level Up Artists Business Community. This ever evolving membership values community over competition and growing connections with fellow creatives who share the same goals and challenges as you.
Life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Art school or self-taught, emerging or seasoned professional, there's a lot of information out there, but what do working artists actually need?
Other industries have continuing education programs for their professionals to sharpen up their skills and stay up to date with the systems, technology, and tools needed to succeed. And we believe that artists should too.
We've spent countless hours of trial and error weeding through tons of information to find the gold and creating sustainable systems that actually work so you don't have to waste your time going down endless rabbit holes.
We are passionate about exchanging ideas and sharing resources with fellow career-minded artists about the business side of art. From artist documents and exhibition prep to templates and tools to help you work faster and smarter, our course modules cover everything from social media to technology and sustainable studio practices too.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartisthub.com to learn more, get immediate access, and level up your creative career today. Welcome back, everybody. So, a question we like to ask everyone on the podcast is, how would you define success as an artist?
So I would define success as an artist. If you're doing what you love and what makes you happy, um, if you're finding peace while you're doing it, if you're able to overcome things like s- struggles or obstacles that you're facing, if you're able to use your artwork to get over that, you're successful. I think that it's very subjective, and different people have different definition of success. Like some people think that if you're making money while you're an artist, you're successful. Some people think that um, if you find success in doing a great job putting together an idea, then you're successful, or a combination of it all. Um, I think that if you whatever you're trying to say with your artwork, if you're able to uh, find a way to communicate that well with the viewers and they get it, maybe everybody won't get it, but if someone gets it, then I think that you're successful.
Very true. I love that. Now, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard before you got started on your creative journey?
Do as much networking as possible. When I first started this journey, I did not network as much. I was a little shy. Like I said, when I first started painting, I was in college, and um, I was kind of shy about it. I didn't really. I saw some artists; they would like literally go to the cafeteria on campus and paint outside or draw outside. And I wouldn't do that type of stuff because I didn't want people to see what I was working on, or was afraid of being judged in the wrong way. Um, but the people that were outside drawing or painting, um, they were able to meet new people. People found out about what they were doing. People knew their name. Finding ways to market yourself. Um, marketing is big, using social media in a healthy way. Um, which means that, social media it can be very great when it comes to marketing, putting yourself out there. So doing that, um, and making sure that you take the advice that makes the most sense to you. And that's something else I can add.
Yeah, I
Love
love
it.
that, especially for taking advice that means the most to you, because as we talked about earlier, there'll be many people, solicited or unsolicited, that give you advice. And ultimately, you kind of have to decide which pieces and nuggets of information are you going to keep, which you'd be like, oh, thank you. Just let it roll off your back. So I think that's a very key piece of advice as well.
I know. Especially the ones that give you unsolicited advice and they go, if you make art, you will starve. And I'm like, I'm not starving, but thanks. Moving on.
And that'll come from someone who's never made art or tried to sell art in their life. And you're like,
Or
Yeah, or they're frustrated artists and gave up. So they're just
yeah.
lashing out. It's like, bye, we're not talking to you. So there's always with a grain of salt, always with a grain of salt. Now, Jalen, if someone randomly hands you $100, what would you splurge on or invest in? It has to be something that brings you joy and relates to your art or business.
I will probably I'll probably buy either paintbrushes, panels to paint on, or paint. I would just use it for materials because you said it was something. It would be have to be something that brings me joy. Obviously,
Hmm.
painting brings me joy. Um, and free money brings me joy as well. So why not take that free money and buy materials?
There you go. Use the money to make more money too, hopefully, than if this painting sells.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love that. Well, Jalen, this has been such a fun conversation. Real quick, what exciting projects do you have coming up that our listeners should know about and how they can support you through that?
Yeah. So I would say that the exhibition at my alma mater at A&T is up right now. It should be up through December. And I have another exhibition that's coming up within the next few weeks at Green Hill in Greensboro, which is right around the corner from A&T. That's coming up as well. And then a little far out from now is the exhibition for the residency that I'm in at Artspace, which is next year in October. So
Nice.
looking forward to creating things for that exhibition and the exhibition to come in between time.
Awesome. We got a lot of things coming up in the pipeline, which is always exciting. So, how can our listeners stay in touch with you after they listen to today's episode to see all those exhibitions?
So my Instagram is Jalen T Jackson, Jalen T Jackson. Website is jalentjackson.com, and email is jalenbcreative@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure to link all those things in the show notes. And Jalen, would you mind staying with us a few extra minutes so we can discuss making meaningful artwork on a bonus segment for our podcast supporters?
Of course.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, in the meantime, if you want to stay connected with us in between episodes, share your feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, you can reach us through social media. I'm at Mayart across all platforms.
And I'm at J Center Studio on all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artist on Instagram. You can also visit levelupartisthub.com to hear the rest of this conversation and become one of our podcast supporters.
This will also give you access to amazing off-the-record conversations with our guests, the artist community platform, and keep the podcast going.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.